Mason Hale stood 3 feet away from me. Not a consultant, not an outsider, my coworker. We shared the same floor, the same deadlines, the same coffee machine. As senior strategy manager, Mason sat parallel to me on the org chart, not above it. We were equals on paper, in practice. He had chosen today to step on my shoulders. That's about to happen. But wait, the snow outside the window is falling gently, and I almost forgot I'm wearing 3 layers of sweaters. And where do you live? What's the temperature like right now if you're still listening? Please share your lucky number to help keep our conversation warm. Return to the meeting room, Mason said calmly, almost kindly. These are Elena's numbers, and these are the mistakes. Red highlights appeared one by one. Deliberate, surgical. If this had gone live, Mason continued, we could have exposed the company to tens of millions in unnecessary risk, someone whispered. Jesus. No one looked at me. HR stayed silent. The executive team watched like this was an educational video. The CFO finally spoke. Thank you for bringing this forward. Mason. This took courage. Courage? I felt something tighten in my chest. Mason nodded once, the way people do when they're already imagining the next title on their email signature. Then it happened. We need to be honest, an executive said, folding his hands. Elena's approach introduces professional risk. The room didn't react. They didn't need to. My name had just been redefined, not as a person, as a liability. I had spent 7 years keeping our operational systems running across 4 market systems that moved hundreds of millions quietly. Without drama, Mason had never owned a single one of them. His role was to review, summarize, and recommend. Mine was to make sure nothing broke. He advanced through decks, I advanced through outcomes. Mason glanced at me. Just once, not apologetic, satisfied. I waited for HR to stop it. Instead, the HR director cleared her throat. We're not issuing any disciplinary action at this time, she said carefully. We'll need time to verify the findings. Not defend, not clarify. Verify. The meeting ended with handshakes around Mason, as people stood. I stayed seated, realizing something sharp and humiliating. This promotion wasn't built on my mistakes. It was built on the assumption that I wouldn't contradict a colleague in public. They were right. I didn't. Before we continue, I want to be clear with you. The story you're about to hear is a blend of real workplace situations and fictional elements, with artificial intelligence used to deepen the emotional experience and help deliver the message. I hope it resonates with you, and if it doesn't, that's okay too. Please rest well and take care of yourself tonight. I used to measure my work by what never happened. No outages, no emergency calls, no frantic apologies to clients. The so-called errors Mason highlighted had quietly prevented disasters no one ever saw. One adjustment had rerouted exposure during a regional dip, saving nearly 20 million. Another delayed deployment by 40 minutes and avoided a cascading failure that would have frozen 3 markets. They called those mistakes because the profit didn't arrive loudly. What made it worse was remembering how Mason learned them. Late afternoons, leaning against my desk, voice casual. Can you walk me through this part again, he'd ask. I just want to explain it clearly to the client. I explained everything. I believed we were aligned. Colleagues, same badge, same pressure. I didn't realize I was training my replacement. The imbalance grew quickly. Mason was granted provisional authority over reporting approvals. I found out when my access request bounced back, denied. No warning, no explanation. Just a polite system message informing me I no longer had clearance to modify outputs. I was still accountable for results. I just wasn't allowed to touch them. That night, unable to sleep, I reviewed archived versions of my reports. Something felt off. Timestamps didn't align. Figures had shifted by decimals too clean to be accidental. Then I saw it. A post-midnight edit attributed to Mason's credentials. My analysis rewritten to look reckless. I closed the file and sat there. Throat tight, hands numb. The betrayal wasn't personal. It was deliberate. HR called me the next morning. Voice warm, rehearsed. This is just an internal process, she said. No conclusions, no assumptions. She used the word process 3 times, like repetition could turn uncertainty into comfort. I thanked her, hung up, and felt colder than before, because processes leave trails, and within an hour, one landed in my inbox by mistake. It was a forwarded chain between senior leadership, marked confidential. Mason's name sat neatly in the subject line, followed by words that made my jaw tighten. Early promotion consideration. They praised his risk awareness, his initiative, his courage to challenge established contributors. Established contributor. That was me. Reduced to an obstacle he had navigated around. HR hadn't lied outright. They had simply told me the version designed to keep me still. From that moment, I stopped trusting what I was told and started trusting what systems recorded. I enabled full activity logs on my projects. I duplicated reports across secure drives. Every access request, every edit, every timestamp went into a private archive. If my work was going to be questioned, it would not disappear quietly. Mason's confidence grew as my visibility shrank. He spoke in meetings I was no longer invited to. Decisions landed in my calendar, already finalized. Each day felt thinner, as if the floor beneath my role was being sanded down while I stood on it. Late one evening, I checked the central repository to verify a compliance dataset I'd reviewed dozens of times. The folder opened too fast, too empty. One file, the one tied directly to quarterly exposure limits, was gone, not moved, not archived, deleted. I stared at the screen, pulse steady, mind racing. Systems don't lose data, people remove it. And suddenly, HR's calm voice replayed in my head. Softer now, sharper underneath. This is just a process. I understood then. The process wasn't meant to protect the company. It was meant to protect Mason. And for the first time, I stopped asking who was wrong and started asking how long the system had been working against me without anyone noticing yet. I started seeing the errors before anyone accused me of them. A decimal shifted, a threshold inverted, small enough to survive a glance, dangerous enough to matter. Each report carried my name, and each one felt like a trap tightening. Mason was always nearby when leadership noticed. "I caught this late last night," he'd say, stepping in smoothly. "Easy fix." He corrected numbers I hadn't touched, narrating competence while I stood silent. Executives nodded. "Relieved," someone said. "Good teamwork." My stomach turned. The pattern spread. Clients asked cautious questions. "Are these projections stable?" One email read. Another followed. "We're seeing inconsistencies," I answered carefully. Attaching backups, explaining methodology. Mason copied himself on replies, then followed up with calls I wasn't invited to. He smiled afterward. "Just clarifying expectations," he said. Meetings multiplied. I was asked to explain deviations that hadn't existed when I submitted the work. Mason spoke first, framing context. "Elena's approach is innovative," he told them. "But we need guardrails around my name." Leadership watched me like I might fracture mid-sentence. I stopped leaving my desk. I reviewed every output twice, then a third time, still. New discrepancies appeared after approval. It felt hunted, like someone was moving furniture while I slept, just enough to make me doubt my memory. Then the client escalation hit. A forwarded message landed in my inbox. Subject line, concern. The body referenced an email I had never written, sent from my address, acknowledging fault and promising revisions. My hands went cold. I checked the headers. The routing was wrong. The timestamp impossible. Someone had spoken for me. As me. When I confronted Mason, he looked surprised. "I thought you sent that," he said lightly. "I was just trying to help." Help! The word echoed as I realized the sabotage wasn't loud. It was precise, patient, and already convincing others that I was unraveling. I felt the walls closing, not physically, but procedurally, as if policy itself had teeth. Every system I trusted now watched me back. waiting for one final mistake to finish the story. Mason was already counting on it. If you believe documenting every change, preserving evidence, and refusing to stay silent when someone rewrites your work is the right response, leave a 1 in the comments. Your voice deserves to be seen and shared. I found out about Mason's promotion the same way I found out about most decisions lately, after it was already irreversible. The announcement hit my inbox wrapped in cheerful language, congratulating him on his leadership under pressure and commitment to risk integrity. People applauded in the hallway. Someone clapped him on the back. No one looked at me. HR asked me to stop by later that afternoon. The room smelled like coffee and rehearsed sympathy. Given recent developments, the director said, you may want to consider a more limited role. She spoke slowly, like she was offering advice, not erasing years, something with fewer dependencies, less exposure. I nodded, because anything else would have been undignified. Mason passed my desk an hour later, already moving differently. No hard feelings, he said quietly. Then, almost casually, he added, mistakes are expensive. Elena. He didn't wait for a response. He didn't need one. The sentence stayed behind, heavy and deliberate. I kept working because stopping would have confirmed the story they were telling. I delivered reports no one acknowledged and corrected issues I wasn't allowed to explain. The pressure didn't explode, it compressed. Every day felt smaller, narrower, like I was being folded into a version of myself that apologized by existing. That evening, as the office thinned out, a new email appeared. No subject line, no warmth, just a calendar invite. Sender Legal Department. Required attendees listed my name first. No agenda, no explanation. I stared at the screen, feeling something shift. Promotions are loud by design. Legal meetings aren't. One celebrates a narrative, the other audits it. I accepted the invite without hesitation, whatever Mason thought he had buried. Legal wouldn't be impressed by tone or timing. They cared about records, about intent, about who touched what and when. For the first time since the meeting where my reputation cracked, the humiliation loosened its grip. I wasn't being removed from the story. I was being called into the part where facts start answering back. Silence had protected him before, but it would not survive what documentation was about to reveal. I didn't confront Mason after the promotion. I didn't argue, escalate, or defend myself. I did something quieter and far more dangerous. I audited the system backward. At night, when access logs stopped refreshing and offices emptied, I traced activity one layer at a time, not opinions, not summaries, raw records, authentication trails, edit histories, permission changes. The system never lies if you ask it the right questions. It only waits. Mason's credentials appeared where they didn't belong. Restricted folders, after-hours sessions, manual overrides flagged as routine maintenance. He hadn't broken in loudly. He slipped through gaps designed for emergencies and left just enough justification behind. I followed each change to its impact. Numbers adjusted, assumptions nudged, errors introduced carefully, then attributed to my profile downstream. There it was in sequence. He altered inputs, let reports fail validation, then stepped in publicly to correct them. The system recorded it all. Indifferent to motive. Timestamps aligned too perfectly to be coincidence. This wasn't ambition. It was orchestration. I documented everything. Screenshots, hashes, exported logs mirrored across isolated drives. I didn't feel angry while doing it. Anger rushes. This required patience. Calm sharpened my focus. Every click felt deliberate, almost ceremonial. Near dawn, I followed one final thread. A data pull routed through an external gateway I didn't recognize. The destination wasn't internal. It wasn't regulatory. It belonged to a firm we'd lost bids to twice in the last year. Our competitor. I leaned back and exhaled slowly. Mason wasn't just rewriting my work. He was packaging it, negotiating value elsewhere while dismantling my credibility here. The audit had stopped being about my reputation. It was now about corporate theft, and for the first time, I understood why HR had hesitated, why leadership had stalled, why silence had been encouraged. They weren't just protecting Mason. They were avoiding what this trail would force them to admit. Consequences were about to spread. I stopped trying to correct the narrative. That was the moment my strategy clarified. Mason was thriving in the spotlight. Meetings revolved around his updates, his warnings, his controlled urgency. I let it happen. I asked fewer questions. I deferred in rooms where I once led. Silence, used correctly, is camouflage, while Mason performed. I moved offline. I packaged the evidence carefully, without commentary. Access logs showing unauthorized entry, version histories proving deliberate edits, email headers tracing messages sent under my name, each file labeled, cross-referenced, and verified twice. The first packet went to legal, not HR. Legal understands intent, not tone. The second went to an independent audit firm our board trusted during acquisitions. I didn't accuse Mason. I presented timelines, systems, impact. I let the data speak in the language institutions respect. Days passed. Mason grew bolder. He joked in meetings. "We dodged a bullet," he said once, glancing at me. No one laughed. But no one corrected him either. That was fine. Arrogance accelerates exposure. Then, without warning, his resignation hit the system, effective immediately. No farewell email, no explanation, just a calendar update canceling all his meetings. I learned later that legal had confronted him with a narrow question why his credentials appeared inside restricted systems after midnight, and why identical datasets were routed externally days later. He didn't deny it. He reframed it. Career opportunity. He'd called it. The company accepted his resignation within the hour. Clean, quiet, protective. They avoided a public fight by removing the variable. I didn't celebrate, I archived. Because exits aren't endings. They're transitions. And Mason leaving the building didn't mean the damage left with him. It meant the consequences were about to land somewhere much higher. I stayed invisible, knowing restraint was now leverage, and that every unanswered question above me would eventually circle back, demanding signatures, explanations, and accountability from people who had applauded his confidence without ever checking where it came from in the first place, quietly. If you think Mason's exit was exactly what his choices earned, press 2 in the comments. Some endings don't need applause, just agreement. HR called at 7:42 in the morning. No greeting, no buffer, just breathless urgency. "Elena, we need to talk. Now." I could hear papers moving, someone whispering in the background. Panic has a sound. This was it. They told me a competitor had filed a formal complaint overnight, alleging unauthorized data transfer tied to one of our proprietary systems. They're claiming exposure. HR said, sensitive operational models. The accusation wasn't subtle, it was timed. Legal deadlines. Regulatory language. The kind of problem that doesn't stay inside conference rooms. "What do you need from me?" I asked. A pause. Then, quieter. "You're the only one who might have the logs." I didn't correct them. I opened my archive. Every access, every edit, every outbound request Mason had routed after hours. I sent nothing yet. I asked one question instead. "Have you reviewed Mason Hale's credentials since his resignation?" Silence. Then someone else came on the line. Legal. "We're doing that now," he said carefully. Minutes stretched. I watched my inbox refresh. Then the message arrived. "We see it," HR said, voice stripped of pretense. "He's the only common access point." They hadn't expected that. They had expected ambiguity, a shared failure, a narrative they could dilute. Instead, the logs formed a straight line from Mason's account to the external endpoint. No detours, no other names. "So you're saying," HR whispered, "we're exposed because of him." "I'm saying the system recorded exactly what happened," I replied. I preserved it. The call ended without closure, no apology, no thanks. Just urgency redirected away from me. Within the hour, legal requested a formal transfer of my records. Compliance followed, then the board. By midday, the tone had changed everywhere. I wasn't being questioned anymore. I was being consulted. The story had flipped. Not because I argued, but because evidence doesn't panic. People do. And when they did, they finally saw what I'd been holding quietly all along. The investigation didn't arrive with drama. It arrived with calendars, interviews, and locked folders. Mason's name appeared everywhere, highlighted, bracketed, followed by phrases like unauthorized access and data exposure. I was never asked to speculate. I was asked to confirm timestamps. The competitor moved first, within 48 hours. They terminated negotiations and issued a statement distancing themselves from improperly sourced materials. Translation: whatever Mason tried to sell them was radioactive. Our board didn't spin it. They couldn't. Regulators had been notified. Silence was no longer an option. Leadership gathered us in a mandatory meeting. The tone was surgical. We identified procedural failures. The CEO said, and individual misconduct, no name yet. But everyone knew. When Mason attempted to defend himself through counsel, the response was brief. Logs don't argue. Timestamps don't misremember. His narrative collapsed under its own precision. I watched it all from my desk, calm in a way that surprised me. This wasn't revenge. It was alignment. Actions finally matching records, the system correcting itself, slowly, publicly. Mason tried once to reframe it. A statement circulated blaming cultural pressure and unclear boundaries. It lasted one afternoon. Legal responded with a timeline. Start, access, transfer, exit, end. Colleagues avoided eye contact in hallways, then slowly returned with questions they should have asked months earlier. No one apologized. They just recalibrated, instinctively. The way organizations do when certainty changes hands and blame finishes choosing its final address without ceremony attached. By the end of the week, the board issued a formal disclosure acknowledging the breach and naming the responsible party. Investors were briefed. Controls were frozen. Mason's career didn't explode. It evaporated. That afternoon, HR requested a meeting. Different tone now. Direct. We'd like you to return to full authority, the director said. Expanded scope. Oversight across systems. I didn't answer immediately. Power offered after damage always arrives late, but this time, it came with access, not apologies. I accepted, not because they were sorry, but because the role now matched what I had been doing all along, protecting the system. Quietly, until the truth could no longer be ignored. I didn't feel victorious when my title was restored. Relief came first. Quiet and steady, like air returning to a sealed room. Leadership corrected the record publicly, and with it, my credibility returned intact. The promotion followed, higher than before, with authority aligned to responsibility at last. Mason didn't fight it anymore. He didn't issue statements or seek sympathy. He simply vanished from the industry, escorted out by process and memory. No applause, no pity. Consequences don't need drama to be final. What stayed with me was the irony. He exposed my mistakes. HR exposed his career. Weeks later, I signed the new control framework. Mandatory logging, segregated access, no unchecked power dressed as initiative. My signature sat at the bottom, not as revenge, but as closure. Justice isn't loud. It doesn't celebrate collapse. It builds systems that remember everything, so no one like Mason gets to hide inside silence. There's a moment in stories like this that never shows up in meetings or reports. It's the quiet second when you realize no one is coming to rescue you, not because you're wrong, but because systems move slower than harm in that space. You either disappear politely, or you decide to stay present long enough for the truth to catch up. What carried me through wasn't anger. It was something steadier, the decision to document, to breathe, to trust that facts, if protected carefully, still matter. I learned that integrity isn't passive. It's active, technical, sometimes lonely. It looks like saving files no one asked for, asking questions no one wants to answer, and resisting the urge to explain yourself to people who already chose a version of you that's convenient. There's a hard ethical question buried here, and I still sit with it. When you see wrongdoing that benefits others and costs you, do you expose it and risk isolation, or do you adapt, survive quietly, and let the system keep lying? What would you do if telling the truth meant standing alone for a while? I'm sharing this not as a victory lap, but as an invitation. If you've ever felt erased at work, misunderstood, or blamed for someone else's ambition, you're not imagining it and you're not powerless. Staying careful, staying human, staying honest can still change outcomes, even when it doesn't feel dramatic. If you're listening right now, tell me where you're tuning in from. Your presence matters more than you think. And if this story resonated, consider subscribing. One subscription helps this message reach someone who might need it tonight. A like or a share might help another person choose courage over silence. You're not just watching, you're helping this story do some good. This story was fully created and produced by our team. We do not copy or borrow content from any other channel. Thank you for staying with us and listening until the end.